Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm fine. Hope you are.
I am. Good, good. I'm a little early. I know that Dr. Kennedy invited me to the session. I know they said that you weren't getting started until 12:30, but I just wanted to go ahead and log in because if I didn't, I would forget.
Yeah, the same way with me. I forget everything anymore. I have to write everything down. Where are you located?
I am in Thomasville as well. I'm Director of Student Services. I know
Okay.
that, but we just kind of work together in the scheduling world, and he mentioned that you would be talking with our APs about master scheduling today. So I wanted to join and get a little bit of.
Well, thank you for that. Chris mentioned that he was going to have someone from Student Services and a couple principals, and I had gone in and written everybody's name down so that I would know who we would potentially be having today. And he didn't tell me, he just said somebody from Student Services. But welcome. I hope this won't be too boring today. It'll seem like it'll be an hour, but it'll seem like all day. I'm quite sure. But,
well, I am in the learning process when it comes to master scheduling. It always, I feel like I always have it, and then it gets jumbled and confusing. So,
well,
any help that can be offered is wonderful.
Well, what I wanted to try to do today, is provide some clarity to the process. We won't get down in the weeds. I've got a couple of 1-minute clips from a session actually last night. I've got a principal that works with me. She did a couple minutes last night on some individual scheduling pieces like for EC and using EVOS, but mostly what we're going to talk about today is the rationale of scheduling. How you start, where you start, and how you work through each of the 5 different rationales of scheduling. You start with your federal programs. They have to come first.
Mm-hmm.
They have the most restrictions. They're the most intricate. And I've got a 1-minute clip of I'll play of Sheena, how she does a spreadsheet of all of her EC kids, and what level of services they get, what their designation is, what their delivery mode has to be, and how you build that, your federal programs. And then she does a minute on how to use EVOS to make program decisions and teacher decisions and those kinds of things. But we'll work through the rationale of federal program, state law, local board policy, EVOS, and then teacher input, and in that order. So you're getting the extra today that you're going to have to hear this again. But I find if you understand that, and it has to be that way every time. Good morning, Aaron. Or is it afternoon already? Just feels like morning.
Good morning. How are you?
But if you understand that rationale, it helps clarify in your mind. Now, it doesn't make it any easier when you're doing mosaic schedules. That's a fancy way to say school within a school, or schedule within a schedule. And so, but that's what you have to do. You have to build each of those, and then you have to bring them back together in that mosaic. And it's not easy, but if you understand your rationale and what your priorities are in scheduling, it helps to clarify who, what, where, when, and why.
Dr. Dreher and I used to build some mosaics together back in the day, mosaic schedules. I'd say, hey, is this going to work? And she'd look at me and be like, no, Klein.
And see, elementary schedules are so much easier. And then it's the middle and the high school schedules that blow me.
I know. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot.
Show me how to do
it. Well, but elementary schedules now, with all the different components, have taken on much the same degree of complexity as high school when you're looking at intervention, MTSS, whatever your system is, your reloop, you know. I know high schools have always had like freshman academies and recovery and all that things that makes theirs difficult. But when you add MTSS, all your intervention programs into the elementary, along with working out your matrix of all delivering your exceptional children's programs, elementary schedules have gotten just as complicated, unfortunately. But the notion of serving every child, it's pretty much like what we're doing now is an individual PEP for every child in the building.
Sadly, the things that happen here, we start with social studies science, then we try to merge writing in and separate, not have a separate writing to kind of merge that and infuse that, which should be easy, but it's not. We much rather have a writing block, but to save these spaces and time for that, you have to, something has to give.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a time-space continuum. I mean, people can only be in one place at one time. I have to explain that to my wife quite frequently.
I will tell you, to your point, Dr. Lamb, I've been an administrator at all three levels, at elementary, middle, and high. And I will tell you that probably I was really surprised at how difficult it was to schedule elementary, because, you know, yes, you have a lot of individual pieces at the high school, but there's so many things that you're trying to juggle in elementary versus the high school. When you set the matrix, and then, you know, the power school will tumble a lot of the schedule for you, and then you fix some of the holes, as opposed to building the matrix is probably the most difficult thing in elementary school.
Absolutely. And I tell all the folks that I work with, last night's group is a postmaster's group that are doing their certificate. They're usually, a lot of them are APs. And one of the things that I talk to them about is I know, now you might deny it, but you know, I know that somewhere in your building, there's a big white board that's gridded off with stickies. Don't lie to me and tell me that you do it using the scheduling program. You're not that good. That somebody, but the trick is who puts what stickies where. That gets, you know, who decides whose name goes on what sticky where. And that's the whole idea, is the rationale. So when I have the folks that work with me, when we have our students looking at master schedules in their buildings, we don't start with look at the master schedule. We start with look at the process, the rationale of what are your priorities in scheduling. And that's what will lead you to whose name goes on what yellow sticky. That's the part where it gets complex. You know.
Well, Dr. Lamb, I'm going to tell you, Mr. Freeman, who's our high school principal, just logged on, and if you'll look over his left shoulder there.
There it is.
It's cleaned up for the rest of this year, but it's about to get messy going into next year.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a tried and true. One of the first things that I did as a high school principal in Charlotte, I had them come into my office on the biggest wall, and it closed. It had doors on it, so I didn't look so dumb to the people heard me talk to the general public. But when you open those doors up, big whiteboard and big whiteboard, and both of the doors had whiteboards on the back of them, and it was in the conference area of my office. And we would sit there for days, you know, grinding and scratching our heads and other parts of our anatomy, trying to put it together, because we had just gone from a 7 period to a block, and then freshman academy, you know, was added at that time, and all those things were being added, and a credit recovery. All three of those were added in Charlotte-Mecklenburg at the same time in about, I want to say 97. And so all of a sudden, and we were using Socrates back then before Power School came along, we were having to use Socrates, but the deal was you had to build the matrix to go into it just like you do now. And so that part's not changed over the last 25 years.
And I know that very cabinet you're talking about that had the whiteboard inside and the whiteboard on the back of the doors.
Yes.
All right, well, folks, we'll go ahead and get officially started. So welcome everyone to the development part of our Apex Professional Development. So we're happy to have with us today Dr. Dale Lamb of Gardner-Webb University, who is in their school administration program, was recommended to me by a dear friend and colleague. And so as part of Gardner-Webb's outreach, they are happy to provide professional development to folks. So this is part of our, and Dr. Lamb and I talked about our assistant principal executive development, following along with the executive standards as state aligned standards. And so on the call here, Dr. Lamb, we have our 5 assistant principals from the district, plus Dr. Jessica Dreyer, who's our director of student services at the district, who you were talking to. Dr. Angela Moore Little is the principal of Thomasville Primary School. And Mr. Calvin Freeman is the principal of Thomasville High School. And then you see Mr. Aaron Klein, who's assistant principal at Thomasville Primary. Mr. Ronnie Hewitt, who shares between Thomasville Primary and Liberty Drive Elementary. Shell Posley, who's assistant principal at Thomasville Middle School. And Megan Sylvie and Jamil Rhodes are assistant principals at Thomasville High School. Forgive me for introducing you all when I know you can speak for yourselves, but I love you all so much and I'm proud of you. And so I'm going to turn you over to Dr. Lamb's capable hands.
Oh, good afternoon. Thank you. Thanks for that warm reception. That's people usually say bad things, but I'm glad to be here. For one of the few times in my life, I'm being paid what I'm worth. So don't expect too much. But I'm pleased to have you all with us today. I think, do I have an hour, or how much time do I have? I always try to.
Yes, sir. About an hour will be fine.
All right. I try to be respectful of your time. I could go all day and all night. You'll figure that out pretty quickly. So I want to walk us through what we're here for today. Just a quick statement. And this is from my era, 1995. Let me share my screen. And I'll pull this one up. This is kind of an overview, the notion of why we're here today. To maximize student learning and student learning time, meet all the requirements from federal, state, and the district level. A well-planned schedule can result in more effective use of time and space, the instructional climate, delivery, and that's why we're here. And so that is the notion of what we're doing today. So here's a quick, and you can see I'm not very fancy. Here's a quick and easy PowerPoint that should have been shared with you. And the whole idea is that master scheduling is the cornerstone of your school improvement plan, of your academic initiative. Everything we do should be leading toward the notion of academic performance. I tell our students, our postmaster students, we have 2 programs at Gardner-Webb, and I'm not doing a sales pitch, but we have 2 programs. We have a master's program that leads to certification, and we have a postmaster's in between our master's and doctoral programs, where people just come back who already have masters and sometimes even have their doctorate and come back and get a licensure. So we're not talking about kids, we're talking about people who are usually already in the job at APs. And the first thing I tell them is, if you're one of those people who believe that standardized testing doesn't adequately measure what a child knows and aren't of any value, drop the course now. Get out now. Get your money back before you get in. The corner of the realm is academic performance as measured by standardized testing. That's what we live by. If you don't understand that, if you're one of those people who doesn't agree with that, then I appreciate your philosophy, but you can't be in this business. It's all about achievement. There's a reason why we keep score, because it matters, and that's performance is king. And so the whole notion of your master schedule is to be the cornerstone of that school improvement plan of getting more academic achievement out of your kids. That's it. if you make the mistake of trying to please teachers, that's circular. That's like a dog chasing his tail. That's never going to happen. The worst thing you can do is develop a bad master schedule. People complain, you flush it and do another one. And then the half that were happy are now mad, so everybody's mad. If you've got a bad master schedule, it means you had a bad process that led to that schedule. And so the two cornerstones of your school improvement plan are the master schedule and the school budget. They must all, the budget must support your academic initiatives along with your master schedule. You know, you can't say our emphasis here is reading. We didn't put any extra time in our schedule, or didn't make it a priority, or didn't spend the money that we had on the reading program that we needed. Those things all have to work in concert. So today we're here for the part of the cornerstone is the master schedule. And so the things that you will need to start the master scheduling process, here's what you need. You need your report card. You need your EVOS school report, your school improvement plan, your old master schedule, your duty roster supervision schedule, so you know where you got people scheduled and on planning time or when they have time away from classes, your teacher working condition survey, and your latest accreditation report. You need all of those things when you're going to be a master scheduler. And I'm going to kind of work up from the bottom here and speak to these quickly. Your latest accreditation report will have a lot of your community information about your demographics. And I know that y'all are Title I, and I know that you know the difference between a Title I school and a Title I program. But your accreditation report has a lot of valuable community information and can be sometimes an eye opener in terms of what you're working with, in terms of what you should be doing and shouldn't be doing. TWC, you always want to know how teachers feel about their involvement, especially you look at that point. I'm valued as a decision maker. I'm involved in the process, and we want to involve teachers in master scheduling, but they're number 5 in the priority. They're not number 1. I have a long-winded story I tell my students about that, where I visited an intern at a school, and 2 weeks later I had to go back and make the same visit again to visit with the new principal. He had made the mistake. Now, this wasn't a school that was on the beaten path. I was so far, I went down 40 from Raleigh toward Wilmington. Halfway down, I got off at Newton Grove and headed toward Thomasville. My GPS just showing a spinning wheel. I drove through some man's carport down his driveway to get to the school. Can't make this up. The point of the story is you would have to hunt the place to get there. And when
Were you
I
going
got
to Chinkopin?
Yeah, that's exactly where I was, in Chinkopin. And so I went to Chinkopin, and I was visiting the school there, and I had to go back. But I had to wait an hour to see the principal. They were having a Title I audit when I got there. They were a Title I program, not a Title I school. And he had let the teachers talk him into balancing the loads in the 3rd grade, and they had put 30 kids who weren't Title I kids into Title I classes. And I'm quite sure the teachers called that day and said, we've got 30 kids in our classes that don't belong. And you don't misspend federal money but once. And so I had to go meet the new principal 2 weeks later. But he had taken that data from teacher working condition survey and that teacher input and allowed them to do that, not understanding that federal programs comes first. Your supervision schedule and your duty rosters, those factor into who's covering, doing your adequate supervision. You have to have enough time built into your schedule that, to give planning time. Of course, your state law on planning and duty-free time. One of the tricks that some folks do is do their duty-free at lunch, so they don't give duty-free lunch and duty-free time elsewhere, so that they can utilize those people on their duty roster and supervision schedule. Looking at your old master schedule gives you a starting point. Your school improvement plan tells you what your academic initiatives are. Your EVOS report tells you what kids should be with what teachers and what teachers should be teaching what courses. And by the way, I have Dr. Jeff Hamilton, who works with me, who does a wonderful 1 hour on EVOS. If you ever want to know that, I do one on how the actual, believe it or not, I'm a statistician by trade. I can do the analysis of variance and the linear regression that is EVOS that gives you the prediction score. He does how to use it. does a really good 1 hour. He just did it for Central Middle School in Whiteville. We're partnered with him as well. But your EVOS report, and of course your report card tells you what's important. Dr. Robin Hamilton, who's principal down at Parsley in Wilmington in New Hanover County, works with us. Last week, one of the things that she did for students is she showed how she went through the report card and calculated for an elementary school what percentage of her report card was tied to what grade levels and what courses. And when she had an opportunity to add a teacher, she knew to the master schedule, she knew where to plug that teacher in according to that state report card in terms of her 5th grade counts half, her 4th grade counts a third, the different courses on her report card. So when she got another teacher, she added it to 5th grade because that's what counts the most. Again, that's why you have to understand that it's all about performance and that the performance matters, because it will influence those kinds of decisions when you start master scheduling. So let's jump right in. Here are the 5 rationales for master scheduling. They go this way, every time, doesn't matter how many different ways you ask me the question, the answer is always going to be federal law comes first and the programs associated with that. Calvin, you got a question?
Yes, sir. I wanted to know if I can invite my counselors onto this Zoom.
Everybody's welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And I'm from Whiteville, went to Central Middle School.
There you go. That's one of my favorite places. I go through Whiteville quite often, heading down that way, either going to, Williams Township. Of course you do.
Yes, sir.
Heading down there.
Tabor City. Yes, sir.
Yep.
I see your Sunset Beach sign behind.
When I go to Sunset, I go down through there, and I have friends from Hallsboro. When I get off there at Hallsboro and head down that way, I go through Whiteville and then go through Hallsboro, down into Tabor City. I had George Fishburne was my last intern down at Williams Township.
Okay.
Good people. So I'm glad to know that got good people with us today.
That's my stomping grounds. Thank you, sir.
Wonderful place. So here goes your scheduling rationale. Your federal programs have to come first. Now I got asked a question last night. Is your academically gifted program a federal program? It is technically part of your EC program. They don't offer a lot of funding or a lot of personnel. So a lot, that's one of those caveats. A lot of districts, their AIG is more supported by their district. And so you need to know that before you even start your scheduling. We all know that we're talking about federal programs, exceptional children. We're talking about 504. We're talking about English as second language. Let me get to that one right quick. There we go. And so we're talking about EC 504. Also, your intervention team referral kids, when they're referred from out of the intervention team, they get the same protections as if they were EC kids. That makes some difference, and you need to factor that in. But when we're looking at your intervention programs, they are local and state funded, but you have to be careful about their protections. So I went ahead and added them. Title I, whether you're a school or a program, of course, that's determined by the level of free lunch. Another great story on free and reduced lunch, but I'll skip that one for now. I'll tell that one later if we've got time. English is second language, no matter what you call it in your district. Gifted is, but make sure you understand if your personnel are funded locally or whether you got money from the feds to pay them, and then of course CTE. Those are your federal programs, and they have to come first. You have to do. I've got a clip queued up here. I don't know. I'll try to show it. I've got a couple of 1-minute clips I want to show. This is from last night. Dr. Sheena Caton. She's principal at Aiden Grifton. in Pitt County in Greenville. She works with me, and she was explaining how she uses EBOS. That's the first one. I've kind of got it in reverse order, but then she'll do a minute on how she sets that. She starts with her exceptional children schedule, just like here, federal law first, and it kind of comes in the order that I've got it right here on this screen. She starts with her EC, and she determines who the kids are, what their exceptionality is, what their IEP says they're supposed to get, and then the delivery mode. And of course, whether they're occupational or whether they're diploma track. And so if I can do this, I'm going to attempt it. If it's not working, please let me know. Let's see.
Let me just tell you a little bit about what I'm showing.
This is EBOS, and then she's going to do EC.
We can't hear it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll go ahead and pause that. What she is showing is how she uses EBOS to set up her freshman academy. That's one use of EBOS. Another is this is the part of EBOS where you figure out what courses kids ought to have. But the other part of EBOS is what teachers ought to be teaching those courses. So she's working through right now by using EBOS to determine what kids ought to have certain courses. Because they're doing a freshman academy, they're doing support for students, and they're using their EBOS probability score to determine eligibility. Again, there's two functions in EBOS, how you use them. One is what kids you ought to be serving, and two is what teachers ought to be teaching what courses. What courses kids ought to be in, and what courses teachers ought to be teaching. That's part of that EBOS equation. She's then is going to, if I can move forward here, this is what she's showing you now is her and then she's showing how now this is her where this is how she actually starts. This is her EC matrix, and please excuse that you can see some names on this, but she is she's got the kid's name, whether they're in the diploma program or the occupational, what their delivery method has to be according to their IEP, and what their exceptionality is. So she starts with that EC, and she maps out every kid in her building, what they got to have, when they got to have it, how much, whether it's math or reading or both. She maps all that out. That's the heart of her. That's how it starts. And then she takes that, the next picture here, if I can get it. Is she folds that into the bit that's there it is, and then it goes into her matrix of starting to build her master schedule, and then it looks something like this as we go there. It's a process, but she starts hers with EC, folds it into the bigger matrix, and then goes to her other federal programs, and that's the way it has to be done. We start with an EC schedule, every kid, what we're going to do with them, what delivery method they have to have, how we're going to, whether we're doing inclusion or pull out, what we're going to do with each one of those. Fold it into the bigger schedule. Then we do 504 if we have those, our MTSS, our multi-tiered system of support, our intervention, how we're going to do it. Then our Title I comes in, and then we figure out how to put in our ESL kids, then our AG, and then CTE. And once we get all of that, then we can go to our gen ed and start with it. But it has to be that way. in order, because you don't misspend federal money but one time. And then somebody else gets that opportunity. So that's one of those, as I tell my students all the time, we're talking about your house now. We're talking about losing your job and your house. So this is important stuff. Don't misspend federal money. I won't speak for Dr. Kennedy, but I know when I was in the central office, I love you, but I can't keep you if you do that. I can't give you any cover. The feds, they frown upon misspending their money. All right. So once you understand that, then we have to add all of your state laws in when we start with the gen ed and start trying to put all this together. Now, the state law speaks to, the biggest one on state law is class size limits. Understanding that every kid's got to be assigned to an adult every hour or every block of instruction that you have during the day. You can't have time like the old Myers Park schedule in Charlotte back in the 70s, where kids could just leave and go to lunch and nobody was assigned to them. You can't do that anymore. Every kid's got to be with somebody. So you can't just, and you can't just say, well, we'll put them all down at the gym and put 40 down there, or 50 or 80 or in order. You got to go by your class size limits. Then, of course, you got your highly qualified and your teacher licensure. Now, that teacher licensure is pretty straightforward in high school. It gets a little wonky in middle school, I know, because you got some elementary people and you got some high school people, and not everybody is certified in middle grades that can teach everything. And I see a couple smiles from the middle school. I see Michelle smiling. I know she's a middle school person. She understands what I'm talking about making sure that you get, especially when you're trying to do teams, it gets a little bit difficult at times because of certification. But you got to know that. And then your days, hours, and minutes of instruction. Those are all set aside. Some districts do more days and shorter schedule. Some do more days and let me get that right. More days, shorter daily schedule, fewer days, longer daily schedule. Know what you're doing, and there's guidelines. It all revolves around that 185, but some do fewer and do a longer day. They get waivers to do that, but you got to know that. Your planning time, every teacher's supposed to have planning time. Now, it's kind of like, in the Bible, it says if your ox is in the ditch, you can get him out, if it's Sunday, but, you can't. But if your ox is in the ditch every Sunday, you need a new ox. It's kind of that way with planning time. That metaphor may not apply here, but the notion is you can assign teachers to do other things during their planning time every now and then, but it can't be a regular. You have to support their planning time. The biggest one, of course, is covering classes. So you need to make sure that you build planning time in your schedule appropriate to state law and to what your district supports, and that you protect that time, that you're careful about not using or especially scheduling them to be doing something else during planning time. As I said earlier, duty-free time, they're supposed to get 30 minutes a day. A lot of schools put that in conjunction with lunch, or some, like high schools, do 15 before and 15 after the regular schedule. That's according to what it is, but there has to be 30 minutes of duty-free time. And then your teacher work days, how many of those you have and what has to happen during those. And some of the things, and I put that in there, some of the things that you can move some of the things that you have teachers do during the day that would affect your schedule to those work days. You are allowed to do that and kind of keep their work day, their instructional day clean, and move some of maybe their duties to those work days so that you can protect their planning time. It's just one of those quirks of how things work. Now, your local board policy comes next, and they will set whether you have a block, a flex, AB day, traditional, mosaic. They'll tell you what kind of schedule you have to have. They usually define math, reading, science, social studies, language arts, the minutes or the hours of instruction. They also define what special programs you might have that might have to be built into your schedule. Like if you have AVID, that has to be built in. Leader in Me, PBIS, your clubs and organizations. Also, they may address how often you have to build into your schedule where you run what we used to call a club day, we now call a short day schedule to do local assessments. All those have to come into your schedule next. I will show you a secret document if possible here. Let's see if I can do this. This is from Guilford County just a few years back. These are not public documents widely distributed. What this is their non-negotiable list for scheduling at the elementary level. And what they defined is, in order to meet the strategic plan and the district academic goals, again, that's what scheduling is about. And it basically says we're going to reduce these gaps in performance, and you will implement. See, again, here's the special programs. Their schools implemented foundations and words their way. They spoke to Dibbles, M class, which is now, what is it called? iReady. That they would do these, and when they would be assessed, that had to be built into the master schedule. And then they spoke to some minimum times for different, for balanced literacy, for teacher directed reading, core instruction in math, core instruction in science. You have all of these locals that say you got to meet these. I was at Hickory Grove in Charlotte a few summers back. I was stopped to see an intern on my way to Fayetteville, and it was June 11th, and they were in a tizzy because they all went off contract on June 15th, and they'd been told that morning that the board had decided to move because of the new reading initiative. And I'm having a senior moment, the one we're doing now in elementary reading, that the board had decided to move the minutes of instruction from 90 to 120 to allow for that. Pardon?
Read to achieve.
That's it. And so the board had decided, and they didn't notify them until Monday, and they were all going off contract. They had to start all over again on their master schedule in order to accommodate that local initiative of moving that minutes of reading from 90 to 120 for all elementary. And of course, that blew their master schedule up. They already had it in the can and were getting ready to doing the checkout procedures with teachers, getting ready to go off contract in 4 days. And they had to start the master schedule again. That's the kinds of things that happen, but that factors into your schedule. And but again, back to that, I mean, that's the things you have to make sure that you know. And if your district doesn't publish a non-negotiables list, you need to find those kinds of things out.
Just saying I don't have any Wi-Fi down here.
Okay. So, and then we go to, after the local board policies, we go to EVOS. All right. So again, EVOS is such a functional tool. Again, Sheena showed last night how she uses it to determine what kids will be given what courses or what services in their freshman academy, using their predictability or their probability score that they will score proficient, a 3 in the course exam. You can also use it, what teachers work best with what level of kids, what teachers ought to be teaching certain courses. I'll use an example, what an idiot I am. When I was a high school principal, I inherited a European AP teacher who'd never had a kid pass the exam. Now, that was kind of a duh. And so I knew immediately, so I went to his room to see what was going on. I realized right away that, he could teach till as old as I am. He was never going to have anybody pass. That's what we're talking about. That's what EVOS will do for us now. It tells us who ought to be teaching what. He didn't need to be teaching European AP. And the young teacher that I tapped to do that said, well, I've only been here a year. It's the thing that, and that leads to the key to EVOS. It's about talent. It's not about time. Your best teachers, regardless of how long that they've been there, have to teach the courses that matter, and they have to teach the courses that they're best suited to. It can't be about the old model of, you know, I've been here the longest, I get the best kids, or I get to teach the AP courses, or I get to teach the honors or advanced. It's who gets the best results. That's what EVOS does. And so EVOS kind of upsets the social construct of your building sometimes. That social contract that, you know, I've earned the right to teach these kids or pick what courses I want to teach. No, we have to put the people who get the best results, who are the best at teaching certain kind of kids and certain kind of material. And that's what EVOS tells us. And so that's why teacher input has to come last. It has to come last. We have to make all these decisions, and then we can talk to teachers about what kids ought not be together. We know Johnny and Billy are going to fight all day, so they shouldn't be together in the primary or the elementary school. That's just the way it works. That they have to come last in the rationale. They cannot overrule any of these other things, especially your federal programs, like an example I was using down at Chinkopin, where, you know, they let the teacher input violate federal law. We just can't do those kinds of things. And so if you've got a bad schedule, it's because you used a bad process. Your rationale was bad. You didn't understand all the things that needed to be taken into account, and the order that you have to take them into account. That's just as important. Not only the things that we add into scheduling, but in what order we add them in. And so that's an overview of master scheduling. I hope that only took 30 minutes. Hearing me talk for 30 minutes is enough punishment for anybody. And so Dr. Chris said that we could have an hour today, and so I only schedule 30 minutes. It's kind of like I do, so that I'll give you the equal opportunity to ask questions, talk, share with one another. I find when I do these sessions that it's not unusual for the participants to learn more from other participants, from their peers, than they do from me. And about 30 minutes of content's about all that any adult can stand anyway. So I don't want to overburden you. So now I'm going to open up the floor, very informal. If you want to ask questions, or if you want to talk about specific things or how things work in Thomasville, I'm sure that just anybody can jump in and have the platform here. So again, thank you for having me today. I appreciate your time, and we'll go from there.
Dr. Lamb, I'll kick it off with just
All
a thought question. And because I know this is something that we've considered both at middle and high school in working into the schedule, probably got more flexibility at elementary, but I'm just curious of your thoughts about holding aside or trying to build in remote learning going forward, as we emerge from this, and those, you know, how remote learning will figure into delivery of instruction going forward.
We had this, I have I always have sitting principal as my coaches for my classes, because I'm old and I hadn't been in the building in a long time. And that was part of the conversation that they had last night. And I try to get different perspectives. And so one of mine is elementary, middle school. She's in middle school now, and the other is high school. And so that's what they were talking about now, is developing a schedule around virtual learning. Now, for my part, my input, I think absolutely you should. And here's my thought process. I don't know how different districts are doing it different ways, but I think that we ought to develop a master schedule virtually just as well, and that we do live sessions, and that we come on at the same time, and that we build a virtual schedule. And it may not be, I think we've got to build a virtual schedule just like we do a master schedule. I think I think there's too much. I think it's too loosely coupled right now. It's too much catch as catch can. And the first part of that, I have a doctoral student right now, and what he's doing is trying to improve virtual instruction. That's his dissertation. And the whole notion is you have to do a lot of work on platforms, whether you're using Canvas or Blackboard, but how to build those shells and how to build those shells that make it easy for parents and students to follow virtually. See, right now we're just doing random things, and even when we're using Canvas, we aren't requiring those things to be built out completely. If you will indulge me just a second, I'll show you what I'm going to use a Blackboard shell. I know that, are y'all using Canvas? So, but I'm going to show you a Blackboard shell. So I'm going to share my screen. And this is what I'm talking about when I get, let me move this stuff out of the way. I'll close that. Okay.
You been here before? Been on out? Okay, can I see your temperature?
And I know that you've all seen these, but the notion here is I would build a master schedule for a virtual schedule, but I would also have requirements in that schedule of how to build my classes that fit the virtual world, where you no longer are the sage on the stage, you're now the guide on the side as a virtual teacher. But I would have a regular class time. I would do it just like I would be doing if we were doing seated instruction. But the trick is, and let me go over here.
We've been having some of that same kind of discussion when you think about like Canvas and the different type of labels they can have, or modules versus assignments versus
Exactly.
they want to do that. And so it's just important that, we're housing, we're housing our assignments or our recordings in the same place. We try to find ways of giving autonomy to teachers, but we're trying to think about the bigger picture of if parents are wanting to be able to support their students, if it's in modules in one class and it's in assignments in another class, that just becomes a bit confusing.
Exactly.
And
so what
I was just going to say, the other part has been about even things about naming conventions. So one class might consider it doing it unit 1, 2, 3, 4. Another one may say week 2, 1 through 5. And another one might, just say day 100 and whatever, how many days are we into the school year. So just the importance of consistency across the board in certain aspects like that.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do, and so I'm department chair program coordinator of the largest graduate program at Gardner-Webb. And so I have 31 people. It's kind of like having a small elementary school that work with me. And so what I do for all of them is, for each one of our courses that we offer, I build a shell. I build a shell so it's consistent for everyone. Now, I give it to them and they can personalize it, but the shell is completely built. As you know, if you've ever seen a Blackboard shell, it doesn't have all, look at the menu over here on the left-hand side, you can see it doesn't have all this information in it. But when I take a blank shell and I start from the ground up, and I, put the welcome in, meet your instructor, the syllabus, the grading system. This is kind of would be like the parents page that gives them an overview. I have every time that we're going to meet with the link already done. This is every time we're going to meet. We have a regular class every week. Now, I record them all. If you don't attend live, that's okay. It's according to what your attendance policy is. But every session is going to be recorded. But I'm going to come on live. Now, I'm not going to sit and just lecture to the, like the kids. I'm going to come on live, but we're going to do that. And then all of our, I have the first steps, next steps, the whole deal, the books, everything we need. This is kind of a parent overview page. And then I have all the things that you would have. I have the weekly schedule. Everything we're going to do every week already planned out for the entire, do it by semester. And on that, I have all what our modules we're going to cover, and they're all named consistently. Every one of our discussion boards where they engage in a conversation, all the tasks that they have to do, all the reading that they would have to do, it's all on a graphic organizer. And I teach this to our folks in the building. They do this for their classes. Everything needs to be on that weekly schedule. That parents love this. They know everything that's going to happen. And then discussion board, this is to extend the learning that they've done somewhere else. It's not new learning. And it allows everybody to see the responses. You know, for me, I have my folks coming and going to and froing. It's not about reading a chapter. This is about doing some activities and your feedback on those activities. That's what discussion board is. And we have to understand discussion board. And then we have the task and the prompts for the assignments, the instructions for them. Every session we're come on, every material we're going to use for those has to be under that, where parents can review them and go in and do that and see what it is. All of those things. For every session that we're going to come on that semester, we have every document, every link, everything is already built out. Everybody knows everything that we're going to do for the year. Now, the instructors have a lot of personal freedom. If they have a better document than I have, that's fine. But they can't change, what we're going to cover goes back to our student learning objectives, goes back to you, to, standard course of study, Common Core, whatever your curricula is, we build it straight off of that. That's what our modules are. And we're we make sure that exam time, we're good, that we've covered the material that we're going to do. Now, is this a lot of work? Oh boy. But it takes the place of the time that you would spend from 8:30 to 3:30 with students. You would be doing this live and in person with them. You put it all together, and then you understand you don't have to come on for 6.5 hours a day like you have seated. You can do things in a lot quicker, and you can come on for sure. You can come on every day, but for much shorter periods of time, and parents can follow along a whole lot easier. Again, no longer the sage on the stage for 6.5 hours. You're the guide on the side for maybe an hour, 90 minutes a day, that kind of thing. But yes, I would virtually schedule all of this out. And then, now, let me go to another one here and I'll show you. This is a neat trick as well. And I would use it sparingly, only when I'm just trying to go from kind of as an assessment to move from one to the other. You can do respondus tests, which are automatic, and kids can take them any amount of time and assess where they are. This is more for them than you. So if we go in to these are in respondus, and they can take this test as many times as they want, and it's for them to gauge how well they got their learning, and for parents to be able to gauge how well did they learn anything. So it becomes about learning rather than covering material. And so we go in real quick, and so they just simply do this, and they go through, and they can do it any number of times, and it's a good assessment. It benchmarks them all the way through. You can actually put district assessments in this way. You don't have to, as the instructor, be with them. They can take it on their own. They can take it as many times as they want. I know this is not how we've done school seated ever, but if we learn how to build shells by Quality Matters standards, that's a copyrighted group that teaches you how to do this. Well, they had their work cut out with me. But when you learn to build these things, and you don't build them as if you were building a face-to-face class, you build them in a virtual world for virtual classes. And I would absolutely master schedule this so that this class, I'm going to have it, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, or I might have it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday if it's reading. And then I would schedule that where kids weren't overburdened with coming on multiple hours a day, but I would absolutely do a virtual master schedule built on making sure the courses were designed for virtual learning, but also that we didn't, you can do this class once a week, 1 hour a week. I build all of mine to come on one a week. And that I would recommend maybe reading, maybe Tuesday, Thursday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and math, maybe the other. I would do them between the two of those. I'd probably do reading and math, 5 days a week, 1, 3, 1, 2, according to my school improvement plan. But the other things could come on one time a week. So this notion that parents are having now that we're getting killed with this idea of, my kid can't be online 4 hours every day. You can build a virtual schedule where 90 minutes a day, you can do it. I believe that. I believe you can do it in 90 minutes a day. But again, you've got to graph it all out. But the course itself, when they get there, has to work. They have to be able to work in that shell absent you being with them, so that parents and kids can learn, and so that their online time is decreased, but their learning is not, and their contact with the material is not.
And so, Dr. Kennedy, thinking about your question again about having the virtual schedule option, I find myself thinking about, I wish it was almost a hybrid, like there was a way to have a combination of face-to-face. When I say hybrid, I'm thinking about class sizes, and to the point, Dr. Lamb, you're speaking about, learning, student learning. One thing that we've talked a lot about is the amount of student learning loss already. And just thinking about how last week helping math teachers and doing some small group instruction and realizing how big the gaps are in the current classes, anywhere from, that can have up to 20 students in them. It would be great to have smaller class sizes, which means you could have 9 periods in a day. I'm just making up a number. Some maybe be face-to-face if we're doing week A, week B, whatever, but also having some built-in time for that teacher to also have the virtual class in a smaller session. Because when you have a smaller number of students in a class, it allows you to be more intentional or intensive with the instruction that you give them, right? So that's one thing that I've thought about just sitting here listening to the questions and Dr. Lamb, listening to you speak. The other thing that I have thought about though is, when you're going through the list of things, number 4 has stuck out to me as far as your EVOS performance data, because now that we have this aspect of virtual learning, and the teacher who maybe is not performing or has not done so well, could the part of that barrier in their teaching be about the platform that they're having to use in order to deliver the instruction versus their normal ability to teach and work with students? And so I just wonder whether, like EVOS, that doesn't account for that, I know right now, but is that something that would have to be considered when you're thinking about students and placement and stuff like that too?
Well, I know this question was directed to Dr. Kennedy, but I would say instructor ability to use the platform is a very real variable in outcomes now. And if we're looking at outcome variables, test scores, what kids are learning, we have to look at the input variables as well. And so not being familiar with the platform, not being able to build a course that students can follow easily, not having online skills. And so that's why we're going to have to network more than ever and utilize the power in our buildings. And this is one of the ways that some of our younger colleagues can shine because they have more technical skills than older folks generally. That may be pejorative, but I am old folks, so I can say that. So this is an opportunity. One of the things that I did early on, and again, I'm the bad example. Please remember that. One of the things that I did early on when we moved from seated to online, and we've been in this process, and we accomplished it. We started in 2010, and we accomplished it. We went hybrid and then went fully online, and we've been that way for 5 years. Is I do all of mine in pairs. I pair a tech savvy person with person who wasn't, because of just what Michelle was just talking about. Is they have the knowledge and they had been successful seated instructors, but when we went to virtual world, they weren't any good at all. I remember I had one come to my office. I was going to train him how to use Zoom, and he brought his laptop and he says, I can't get a picture on this thing at all. I said, well, would it help if you'd have brought a laptop that had a camera on it? I can't make this up. I still tease him about that, but he's one of the best instructors I have now virtually. And I started with him. He didn't even know you had to have a camera on your laptop. But we pair, and when we bring new people on, we pair them with existing people who have the best technical skills. And that we don't have the time or the money. We can't just stop instruction and say, all right, we're going to put everybody in, and all of our folks in virtual school themselves for the next 6 months. It's, we have to fly the plane while we're building it. And so I would team and pair. That also gives you more time. Again, that speaks to your master schedule though. I would team and pair my folks. And so if something happens and somebody can't come on virtually, the other person is always there. I would do it all in teams. That's one of the tricks that, now, once you get everybody up and trained, you can just have a backup person. But while you're in this early phase, I would have mine working in teams, and I wouldn't team them based on 2 old people who can't find the plug to plug the computer in. I'd have some younger people, working with some older people that I'd vary a varied skill level. That's probably doesn't make much sense, but that's the way I would do it. But yes, I would do a virtual schedule. I would pair my instructors. I would work with department chairs and folks with knowledge of Canvas to build out those shells and then let teachers customize them. But again, the nomenclature is all the same. The menu on the left is all the same. So that we know that certain types of things go in discussion board, other things go into respondents in order to do those exams that we have to make those kinds of decisions. What is the content? What materials would meet this? It's kind of like when your PLC gets together and you share your materials about, I use this to teach this particular thing. I'm teaching fractions. I use this. You do the same thing. The chair suggests some things. That's what I do. But if they've got something to teach that particular learning objective better, I'll let them substitute that out, and they get some ownership in what they're doing. And again, back to that point where you're talking about teacher buy-in and them having some autonomy in their class, that's where it comes. How you teach, there's some autonomy, but what you teach, I've got to have control of that, because there's going to be an exam at the end of this. I can't just let you decide what you want to teach as well. And we'll help you move the things that you were doing face-to-face. They don't fit as well usually in the virtual world. We'll help you adapt that same thing to something that works better in the virtual world. So it's not easy, but once you get there, then you're prepared for anything. You can go virtual, have those shells.
Well, Dr. Lamb, we were in conversation yesterday with our family and community engagement specialists that we've been working with here at the high school. And one of the things that we determined as we work on increasing our attendance during this time is that we have to create consistency as a school in terms of the operations, in terms of what students and parents see when they log in. And making sure that they see what we want or need them to see. And so one of the things where we found ourselves, I think the language I used yesterday was, we're almost starting from scratch as we build these things. And so, because we're in a different time now. And, one of the things that we talked about, just like on your syllabus and on the Zoom dates, we said parents and students should be able to log in and they see exactly what they're able to see what assignments are due next week. And so the type of timing and structure that, and the know-how that we have to get teachers to be able to execute kind of puts us back at from scratch.
Yeah, it's a different business. It's a different job. Again, it's teaching virtually is only somewhat related, like third or fourth cousin, to teaching seated. And there's a whole different skill set. Now, one of the things you notice, just kind of I'll throw a little aside, you notice when I opened up the overall course schedule, the weekly schedule for every week for the entire, you notice I opened it up as a Word document. I didn't have it just embedded in Blackboard or Canvas, so that parents can actually download that as a document and print it out. That's just one of those things you learn along the way. And so, just like you've got your scheduling board back over your shoulder, a lot of times when students come on, I mean, when I'm looking around your offices and seeing different things, a lot of times when my students come online with me every week, one of the things I see in their background pinned to a cork board is that weekly schedule. They love it. Now, each of those individual tabs got all the materials we're going to cover during that section under it, but that overall, they can see when everything is due. They know what they're going to do, and parents can schedule their lives and their family around it. We just always, kids come to school every day. We have when the holidays are, but now we have to develop an academic calendar, an instructional calendar, more than just the school calendar kind of thing. And Calvin's exactly right. It's a whole new world, but they should be able to open up a shelf and everything be consistent on that menu, everything named the same thing. They should see the syllabus, the weekly schedule. They should have every session, and they should have the link already. It's right there for them. I've got it both on the main overview page, and each time they open up, they see the link to join. They know what time we're going to be on. We're going to be on live. They also know we're going to record. Now, two things on attendance, you can do it one of two ways. We'll post the video and you got to watch it in 24 hours, and Canvas and Blackboard will tell you if they viewed it, and that's how you can count attendance that way. Or you can do it by assignment. We do assignment drop boxes. That's different than a discussion board. An assignment drop box is you go when you take a test, you upload an assignment, whatever, and you can count attendance is, I do mine on Sunday night at 9. I have my class on Wednesday. But to be counted present this week, you have to turn in this week's assignment, and it might be something simple, it might be something big, by 9 o'clock on Sunday night. And if you did, whether you watch my video live or came on live with me or watch my video, I count if you turned your assignment in by 9 o'clock, then you attended that week. Again, I have some other folks in other disciplines who, if you watch the video, it's according to how you, but it's consistent. In my program, we're all Sunday night. The instructors that teach for me teach Monday through Thursday, but our deadline for our program, which would be our school, would be 9 o'clock on Sunday night. Now, I have a friend who's a program coordinator in another program at Gardner Webb, and he does if you watch your video. You got 48 hours to watch the video. I'm more interested in the learning. I want to see what, of course, that's not a department of education, school of education. They just want to, they're about content. Did you see it? I don't care if you saw it. Did you understand it? Were you able to, did you get it? Did you learn this? I want to see your assignment. They just want, you know, did you watch the video? That's the difference in that as well. So I would encourage you to see evidence that they used what you did that week. Yes, Calvin.
I was just going to say some of that requires a paradigm shift, and that comes from folks who are above us at the school level, all the way up to the state, trickle down to regions, trickle down to individual districts or what have you. And, you know, our school boards have to be a part of and akin to that paradigm shift as well.
Just because you're pitching doesn't mean they're catching. It's got to be about the catching. It's got to be about what you learned, not about what we covered. And I'll tell you, more than anything I've ever seen in my career, and I've done this for a long time, this has focused us on the difference between instruction and learning. And there is a difference.
Yes. And
It
so
has focused us on that for the first time ever. And I was a principal when we went into accountability in 1990. If you're old enough to know, it wasn't called the state report card. It was called Performance-Based Accountability System, PBAP. And so I'm glad they went to something that was named better than that. But I have lived through comparative accountability, and I've now lived through growth accountability. And this is the first time since the pandemic has focused us on the difference between just instruction and learning, that there is a difference between the two.
Which now forces us to change the way we grade. We have to.
That's exactly right.
We have to sift out some of that stuff that does not matter in the way we grade.
That is correct. That's why I said I only do assessments for my doctoral students in statistics. I only do assessments for them to guide what their learning is. You know, I've gotten, you know, you can't, the test can't be the be all end all. It's supposed to be an assessment. It's supposed to, instructors are supposed to use assessments to inform their instruction. Who got it and who didn't. It's not just supposed to be we take the test in order to get a grade. Duh. I mean, why am I giving this test? So I can get a grade? No, you need to assess where students are. And that's supposed to inform your teaching. What did you miss? So one of the things that I do, and I know I'm not even the smartest fellow in the conversation, but one of the things that I do is I take notes all the time on my students, on what they turn in, even at the doctoral level, master's, postmaster's, and that, you know, I've got to go back and cover this again. I missed that. Michelle, thank you for joining us today. I see my time is up. You've already figured out I'll stay and rant all afternoon.
Well, I was just going to say we're up against the amount of time. I want to thank you, Dr. Lamb, and just one thing I want to circle back to that you mentioned, 2 points real quick, and then those who want to stay are always welcome to stay. But I know we are in the workday and some of you need to go.
Yeah, you need to go.
At the district level, we're going to give a survey to try to get an idea of what the interest is going to be in virtual learning for next year. You know, this starting in March through now, we've kind of all had to do it. As you're planning your schedule for next year and thinking about the possibilities of virtual learning, you're going to have a little more input now into who you might want to do it, as opposed to all of us having to do it now. The other thing I would say, just kind of circling back to Dr. Lamb's presentation, one way that I always think about as it relates to scheduling is you've got your must do's, your need to do's, and you want to do's. And when you start at your must do's, those are all the things in legislation that have the word shall with them. And then all the things that are related to EC services, all the things related to federal programs, all the things, the class size limits, all the things that were in Dr. Lamb's presentation, from your must do's or you have to do's to you need to do's. That goes back to what Dr. Lamb was saying about who needs to be in what classes with whom, and then you're able to get to your want to do's. If you kind of build it from that level, got to do, need to do, want to do, that'll certainly help build your schedule. I look forward to being a thought partner with you. This is my first time. So Dr. Lamb, I just came on board last July. So this is my first time going through a scheduling process with our group, which is why I wanted to bring in the experts on this and try to get that. So we appreciate you very much. APs, was there anything that we needed to come back from leadership? Are we all good? We got a thumbs up on leadership. Everything was good. Okay. So again, for those of you that want to stay and do a little post game with Dr. Lamb, that's fine. As long as he's willing to stay, and everybody else, we appreciate you. And I'll be around everywhere on Monday when we get our kids back in the building to say hello.
Thank you.
I think we're all good.
Dr.
All
Lamb,
right.
as soon as you said getting off the highway in Newton Grove and going on the way to Thomasville and cutting through a driveway, I knew you had to be talking about Chinkapin. Because where Highway 50 goes off one way and the cut goes the other way, I have cut through that back road. I had almost in my mind exactly what you were talking about.
When I tell people that, they think it's hyperbole. It's absolutely the truth. You have to go up that man's driveway.
I have gone through that cutoff. I had a flat. My in-laws have a beach house at Surf City, so I have been down that road tons and tons and tons of times. But I had a flat tire there one time. Showed up in some guy's driveway. Asked him if he'd run me up. I mean, it's the days before cell phones.
Well,
ran
cell
me up
phones
there to
won't
that
work
little
through there
intersection
still.
to get my tire fit. I mean, I knew. It's funny. I knew exactly what you were talking about.
Yes.
Sylvie spent some time down east too, didn't you?
You know exactly where.
Oh, yes, sir. I was down in New Hanover County and Pender County in Pender for a year. That was different.
Yes. We worked when I worked the Eastern Loop for Gardner Webb several years back. I retired in 2010. In 2010 to 15, I worked the eastern part of the state, New Hanover, Pender, we're talking about Chinkapin. I worked at those areas, and then I worked in the summer. I worked the loop from Fayetteville to Rocky Mount to Goldsboro to Wilmington, and that's where I worked in the summer. When we were face to face, we had to teach classes 4 hours at a time, 6-hour classes in the summer, but we worked in the schools with our interns. Now I hire people now that I moved to the main campus 5 years ago, but we still have people go out. We can't now, we're having to do virtual meetings, but we still have people go out and work in those buildings, and we still do these kinds of things. Jeff did an EBOS session for Central, as I was talking about. We're doing different work, but we love to get out in the buildings. I mean, I worked in the business for 32 years, and so and then I traveled and was in schools every day for Gardner Webb for the next 5 years before I came to campus. And so we still do a few, but the thing I find is I enjoy wherever I go. I love it down east. Even though I'm from the West, I love it down east. But of course, I went to NC State as an undergraduate, and back then, I was the only person from west of Charlotte. Everybody was from Eastern North Carolina. Ricky and Roy Etheridge were from Powell's Point up on the Outer Banks, and we'd go up there duck hunting, and we'd go to Newport, or we'd go down to Duplin. J. Michael Moore was from Duplin. We'd go down there and dove hunt. I mean, and so. But what I found is people are people everywhere in North Carolina. They're welcome. They're good. It's just things are done differently. I don't know how we're so divided right now, but I'd like to see us unite over virtual learning and give it the time and effort that it needs. But one of the reasons I was talking about these places, I understand the digital divide. I mean, you even have that in a more urban area like Thomasville. But when you get out in places like we were talking about down in Chinkapin, where your cell phone doesn't even work, the problem with virtual learning is that they don't have the service to do that. I partnered with a little school. One of the fellows that used to work with us here at Gardner Webb, he's principal at Kaiser Elementary, which is in the very northern part of Cleveland County. That's nearly up to Hickory. And I
Hazel
partnered,
Mountain. Yeah, Hazel Mountain.
and I partnered with him, and we partnered with him to try to do fundraisers to get Chromebooks. That they can get some internet. They're using that HughesNet or whatever, that satellite internet up in that area, but they don't have the actual laptop. So we're doing Chromebooks, and for $230, you know, for each one of those. And so, I mean, I think virtual really has an opportunity. I see it more as an opportunity than a hindrance. I think there's a lot of things that we can do with it that we can't do, or that we can advance our business with it. And as I said, it's focuses on learning more than anything that I've seen in my time in the business.
Well, and one of the things we've talked about a lot at the district level is if we don't offer a distance learning option for those that are going to want it as we come out of the pandemic, they're going to find it.
Somebody else will.
We have 13 kids in this district who are in NC virtual. Why are they not in our remote learning opportunities that we had for this year? And the other thing I say all the time is, in fact, before I even started officially, I was named and I was working because we were virtual. I was able to kind of have a foot in both places. And when we wrote the proposal for our remote learning, we said, well, we'll keep it in our back pocket in case we need it. We got 35% of our kids on virtual learning. And pretty much every one of our teachers is having to do some phase of it. You know, we started with a couple of dedicated sections K-5, but then as it just grew and grew and grew, everybody had to touch it in some way or another. So, but I think, and I know that one thing that, and Miss Sylvia's at the high school, and Mr. Freeman is very, and Miss Sylvia, Mr. Rhodes and their team are very keen on how do we reach kids coming out of the pandemic that have been economically displaced, have been detached from the classroom, and they, you know, by the time we come back, if God willing, everybody gets vaccinated and we come back in some semblance, and I really avoid the word normal.
Yeah.
So come back in some traditional setting on August the 20th, we will have been out of a traditional operation for 17 months. Our kids are going to have to get reacclimated. Our teachers are going to have to get reacclimated. And we have found that there are kids that are thriving remotely. And so how do we keep that going for them and give them what they need? Because, you know, I came from Johnston County to here, and our superintendent used to say, you know, we've got to be the best game in town. And we've got to find, you know, public education, we have got to find ways to be the best game in town. And finding ways to serve kids like that is that want it and or need it. Because if you want to go face to face, that's harder to find sometimes, but virtual, man, that's easy.
Yes.
And so we got to be prepared for it.
To the question that you asked, would you do a virtual master? Absolutely. Even if I was doing seated, I would still do a virtual. There's so many people who want it. We have the problem on one hand of the lower economic kids, you know, the digital divide, not having internet or not having a computer. But we also, on the other hand, as you pointed out, with the 13 students with the North Carolina Virtual Academy, you also have that problem as well, that you're going to have people who are going to opt to, if it's out there, the upper end kids are going to opt into that. Mm-hmm. And I'll use an example. My niece is, she graduated from high school. She's 27 years old, so she about 9 years. She graduated in 2011. And her last 2 years in high school in a rural county in western North Carolina, she every morning her junior and senior year started at a different high school in order to get her AP courses. And that was the only way to get them. And so she did that. Now people are going to opt for virtual ways to get those accelerated courses. And if we don't offer them virtually, they're not going to drive to different high schools when they can sit at their house on a computer and get them. That wasn't available then. It's available now. And so you've got the problems on either end, but I believe, as you said, you've got 35% of your population who's thriving online. If you just make them go back to seated, you're going to lose your best ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I just think too that given our population, high minority, African American, Hispanic population that has been disproportionately affected by the impacts of COVID, they're going to be far less eager to get back in a classroom face to face. I mean, we have stayed at that 35% level of those who are choosing this. We, at the end of the semester, we let folks come off, and we had about 10% come off. But I bet, Sylvie, I don't know if you're in that loop, but I bet you all at the high school have had 15 this week. Either had come off and want to go back, or were face to face and want to go remote as the numbers spiked after Christmas.
And we'll see it next week too, when we come back. I did have 3 questions for you, Dr. Lynn. One was, we're just thinking, and Dr. Kennedy, about if we're going, for those going virtually, I heard you say something like, it sounded like a college schedule, like you might do reading Monday, Wednesday, Friday, math Tuesday, Thursday. So it looks different. It looks more like a college schedule.
Again, we're going to have to do a mosaic where we have school or schedules and schedules. I don't believe virtually you have to meet every day and
Right.
for really as long. Again, the best virtual classes aren't like we just open up and go for an hour at a time and do lecture and take notes kind of thing. We have to reimagine what the virtual classroom looks like. And we do a lot more of posting assignments to discussion board and those kinds of activities where they don't actually have to be online. Now, they may be sitting at their little desk at their house for 6 hours every day with their mom, but they don't have to be online. They don't have to have that connection online. That doesn't mean that they're not working 6 hours a day or 6.5. It just means they don't have to be online with you. You need to design your courses where they only have to be with you as little time as possible. Again, it's about the learning. It's not about, we have equated seat time with learning. Virtual school focuses on that. It's not about seat time. It's about the learning. And so I probably wouldn't have any class meet more than 3 days a week.
So my neighbor is a junior at a neighboring high school, and she says for math, she was telling me, for math class, the teacher has a pre-recorded lesson. And then I said, but what if you have a question? And she said, well, we have to email her this hours and this hours and these hours. And I was like, I don't know about that.
I do not allow.
Some kids that would work okay.
I do not even allow college at the postmaster's and doctoral level that I do not allow pre-recorded lessons even for adults. You have to be live. That's why I said I pair mine. If you're sick, then your partner takes over. I want live every week. I only make mine do 1 hour a week. Now we make the new ones do 2, because just like tonight, they had to come on. I do the technology. I teach them Blackboard, Zoom, YouTube, and TaskStream. They have to come on once a week for their lesson, and we have to come on once a week for technology training. They only have to do that for that second time for 4 weeks. I've jammed it all into 4 weeks. And so the last week of that is tonight. But other than that, once you learn how to manipulate all the technology that we have, 1 hour a week, but it has to be live.
Right. So I worry about it. One of the things, and I agree with you that virtual can be an opportunity, but also those kids that have learning disabilities and things like that, is virtual going to be, I worry about them.
That's why I have 2 people come on And it would be like you would have your teacher and your inclusion teacher. You click on the breakout room, the teacher and
Right.
and that kid go to the breakout room if they have a, if you need to do that with them.
And that's what we're doing right now. I'm working with
Yeah.
an English 2 teacher who has a push in ESL and an EC. So they're using breakout rooms, but we're focusing on those even more with more intention. The other thing was, it seems to me that kids would be able to they don't have a traditional 4-year eventually, right?
Of course not.
I mean, I'm just going to
We
take.
already
like
got
they do
away
that
from
in
that with
college.
early college. I mean, how long have we been doing early college where we broke that traditional 4-year cycle? We've been doing early college for what, 20 years?
Let's do it.
So the community colleges would have some business. In a state where we built 58 community and technical colleges, and they have multiple sites like CPCC in my home county. I live at Lake Norman, is where my home is. I'm in my place in the West right now, but I've lived in Lake Norman for 26 years. We have 5 different campuses of CPCC in Mecklenburg County. So we have 58 with multiple campuses, and we overbuilt because, of course, we got out of school construction in '66, and the people who ran the state were in the construction business. So we started building community and technical colleges. And so, a few years ago, we figured out that students weren't going to do that. They were going to go to the traditional 4-year colleges. And so that's how the early college was born. I'm through that little history lesson there to say this. The only reason we ever did things like we did them was, because of buildings and not for learning. And when the early colleges, when community colleges and technical schools didn't have any FTEs, full-time equivalent, any enrollment, then we said, we'll do early college. And that broke that 4-year cycle, because basically you were only in high school for 2 years and you were in junior college for 2 years. So we've already broke that cycle.
That's true. I didn't think about that. You're right. The last thing I have, and then I have to go, is you're from the western part of the state. Where?
I'm in Lake Lure right now.
Oh, okay. I grew up in Burke County. When you said Kaiser Mountain, I know right where that is.
I was principal for 4 years in the central office, for 1 year in Burke. I was at Oak Hill on 181 going to Linville.
Oh, I know Oak Hill well. My brother and my sister went there. And then I was supposed to go there, and I got bused to Morganton City Junior High.
Yeah. But I was, that was late 80s, early 90s. I was in Burke. I was in Rutherford, then Burke. And then I did my last half for 20 years in Charlotte, Mecklenburg.
I started in Charlotte.
I've lived there in Lake Norman I've lived in the house where I am now in Lake Norman for 26 years. But yeah, I quarantine here and stay here because I go to campus 3 days a week and stay away from my wife. I'm at, where Rum and Ball is, the old Fairfield at Lake Lure, on the Bills Creek side of Lake Lure. And that's where I am. And it's about 45 minutes back down the road to Gardner Webb. And I stay here away from her. We don't have many students come in, but we do come into the office 3 days a week still. And so we've been pretty good, but we've got a couple of folks who have it now, but we've been pretty good. It's hit everybody hard, but we're limited our time in the building, and we're not letting students up they moved all the geezers like me up to the second floor and don't let students up there. Our problem is seriously, we only have one restroom in the whole building. We don't even have one on the second floor. So, but yeah, we're just trying to stay safe. But we're doing a pretty good job, and we've got a quarantine dormitory at Gardner Webb. They only have about 1,250 undergraduates now. 2008 really hurt Gardner Webb in terms of undergraduate enrollment. It never really bounced back after the collapse of 2008, and so we're at about 1,250. And so they had closed one of the oldest dorms, quite coincidentally, one my wife lived in the 2 years that she was at Gardner Webb back in the old days before she transferred out to, after 2 years as you did back then. And one of the old women's dorms, they had mothballed it for several years. They opened it back up as a quarantine dorm. And so we've been able to stay open for most of the time and keep the spread down pretty well. But again, folks like me who have moved their programs virtually, because of the needs of our students, I moved ours. Again, we've been virtual now for 5 years. And I had to learn that, we had to learn how to build the courses, had to go to QM, make sure that all the content matched student learning objectives, and, no pre-canned videos, this whole thing, training everybody, putting them in pairs. We work in pods and pairs and the whole deal. And so these are things that I had learned. I'll just tell you, you've already figured out, I'm not too smart. This was just what I've talked about today is 10 years worth of doing this. Y'all had to do it in 10 minutes. I had 10 years.
Well, and funny you mentioned that, because I did my master's and doctorate in a blended setting.
Yes.
I was doing my master's in a distance blended setting in 2007 and 2008.
Yeah.
I mean, that was before it was before
a
it really
thing.
became a thing.
Yeah.
It was cutting edge stuff then.
Yeah. And we started for real in August of 2010, moving this way.
Yeah.
And so it's taken us 10 years. And so that we expected school districts and teachers to be able to adapt in 10 minutes was a little unrealistic.
Yeah.
And we have a lot easier, and it's a lot easier for us to make the shift, the paradigm shift, than it was for public schools. But why we thought we could shift and be successful in just a few minutes, that was an unrealistic expectation. But again, if you're going to go virtual, you got to start from the very basics of how do you build a shell, what your platform is, the very idea of what is online instruction. It's not the same as seated. It's not just taking what you did seated and just putting it all in a shell. It doesn't work that way.
And Sylvie, I think exactly what you said, how you started this first question. If we're going to do a virtual only, that we're not trying to marry it to a traditional setting like we've had to do since last March. So if we come back and say, okay, we're going to offer THS online, or whatever, however we want to call it, and then craft it the way that we would want to craft it. If we know that we got to serve 36 kids, I mean, whatever.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, I don't think that we've got to say that first block meets Monday through Friday at 10 o'clock and second block meets Monday through Friday at 11 o'clock. I think that you can teach, and you could even potentially look at teaching sequential courses the way you would in like a credit recovery situation or something like that, that you teach a course. You're going to teach English 2 intensive from August 17th to November 20th. And then November 21st, you're going to pick up the next set,
Right.
Let's not feel, and we can talk about this, particularly when we get an idea of what we're going to need to provide. But I think that one of the things going forward that we have the chance maybe to be innovative about, as long as we meet the state requirements to do it, is what it doesn't have to look like a traditional school day, particularly at the high school level.
Right.
I think if you're trying to offer virtual instruction at the elementary level, you're going to want that level of structure that goes with elementary instruction. But at the high school level, it can be what we want it to be. And I love that you asked that question, because that really challenged me to think, oh yeah, who says?
Right.
We can run a schedule like that.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Lamb, I'm gonna have to run. I do want to compliment you. I think we get our hair cut the same places. And so
yeah, well, use a towel on mine.
So thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and appreciate the time that we've had, and look forward to working with you going forward.
All right, so I've got us down for April 15th. We're going to how to develop a professional development plan for your schools, and I'm going to bring a couple people with me that day.
Okay.
It's hard to get school people during the day, but I'm guessing we'll do the same kind of time again. I'll log on and I'll send you the link at 12:15 if people will join us. I've really enjoyed it. You know me, I could talk all day about this kind of stuff.
Well, it's just, when you've done what we've done for so long,
it matters.
Yeah, but just getting back in, and I've made the jump to central services now, and just being out of the building now, I start getting twitchy.
Yes.
So I know how it is to get back and be that way. So again, thank you so much.
Thank
Nice
you.
seeing you. We'll see you in 2 months.
All right.
Thanks
Have a
now.
good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.